Hey everyone. So we're at another episode of Get Jashed where we have another returning guest. So today I'm really excited to have back with me Shaun O'Gorman. So Shaun is originally from episode 7 where we explored a lot, a lot around men's well-being and leadership and communication and all of those sorts of things. But Shaun, just as a recap, is a former Queensland police officer and now leadership coach and speaker, and has become one of my good friends. So thanks so much for joining me again, Shaun.
Thank you, Jess. My absolute pleasure.
Yay. So there's so much breadth in what we could talk about here, but I
Sure.
think we could just dive straight into it and talk about, because this is a topic that we talk about constantly when we catch up and when we have conversations, is like communication challenges that human beings tend to present with, especially in leadership positions as well. So what's highlighted for that, like
Yeah,
in that
sure.
area for you right now?
Yeah, totally. So nice to be back with you, Jess. And like I've said to you before, I love what you do because it's that true emotional connection that you bring across in what you do is that definitely draws me to you. I think we have very similar personalities. The thing that I find in the communication challenge stuff is I do a lot of work with high performance executive coaching. I recently did a 48-hour executive immersion retreat with CEOs and partners in law firms with a friend of mine who's an ex-British Special Forces guy. And it's all of this stuff is the basic things I talk about. My executive coaching clients are people who run multi-million dollar businesses or are chairmen of boards of different things, like all the way through to people who run small to medium enterprises. It's all the same stuff. People's communication challenge comes down to, I think, 3 really basic things. One is fear of what people think, clearly. 2, which feeds into that, is then that lack of knowing which version of you to turn up as, I guess. And then 3 is just what's an acceptable way to communicate. And they're all sort of one in the same. But the biggest challenge I see for most people is they just don't know who they are. So people don't know, as bumper sticker as that sounds, people don't know who they are. So if you don't know who you are at your core, that identity and purpose that I talk about all the time in my work, and you and I have discussed, even for you in your work, and for your listeners, a very basic thing is I go, if you don't know who you are and you don't know what your purpose is, you've got nothing to base any decision on. So very simply, I go, my identity is I'm a loving, powerful, connected leader everywhere. If I'm having this conversation with you, if I'm talking to a client, if I'm with my daughters or my beautiful partner, if I'm getting a coffee in the morning at the coffee shop, I have that same identity of being loving, powerful, and connected. And then my purpose is to help people and have a positive impact. Same thing, everywhere. So I don't turn it on and off professionally. It's just who I am all the time. So when I turn up to talk to people, it's easy. So my communication with people is just literally from the heart, who I am. Don't try and pretend to be someone I'm not. Whereas I lived my whole life trying to be a tough guy or what I thought people needed me to be. And ironically, people see me as a tougher guy now, and I don't try and prove it. I'm so much more connected. I'm so much more loving. I'm very open and vulnerable, but I'm not scared of what people think. That's where the challenge of communication comes from. So people are trying to guess, what should I do? What shouldn't I? Who should I be? So it all just comes across as very intellectual and disconnected.
It's so interesting that you use those words also, because I've been talking about that a lot lately too, is like the difference in what communication and self-expression is, particularly communication though. You can't intellectualize it. You
No.
can't use your brain, your cognitive processes to then decide and go, I'm going to say this, and when this scenario comes up, like this is what you should say, and now I know, and now I embody communication. That's not embodying communication. Embodying communication is like, it's bringing it into like this knowing. It's so many different things, but it's this knowing of, oh, I know what it feels like to feel fear in expressing myself, so I
Yeah.
can acknowledge that. Or I understand that someone else might feel that, so I can acknowledge that because I've acknowledged that in myself. And I know what it feels like to have this going on, or to, like I've connected to those things. So it's
Definitely.
empathy building, really. And
Yeah.
also I've recognized what my nervous system is doing with that too. So I've re-regulated it, at least to a degree, at least a little bit, so that it's not like, it's never this cognitive process.
Well, it's a very, very, to put it, and what you're saying is 100% true in my my opinion. It's the very simple thing of going, you can't communicate in your head. It's got to be out of your heart.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just that simple. So in our head, we're in that fear, fight or flight monkey brain. And if your listeners haven't ever heard of a book called The Chimp Paradox, I can't remember who the author is, but there's only one of them. Go and read it or listen to it. It's on Audible. It's amazing the way to explain the way that fight or flight brain works, the monkey mind, which we've all heard of. I'm actually just going back through and listening to it again. I've just started this morning because I haven't listened to it for a few months. And it just helps highlight how much of that fear brain kicks in when we're trying to plan communications or whatever. But these days, I just run from the heart, intuitively and emotionally connectedly, and it just works. So whether it's my keynote presentations, workshops, coaching, on that weekend with those executives, and we took them out we were in Canberra, it was -5 degrees, where they were hiking. It was challenging. And when we went down there, my colleague who I partnered with had done a lot of the structure around timings and different things. And because that's his bag, he does leadership coaching too. My real skill in it was that emotional connection part. And so I was just like, so he planned stuff, we went through it, he did all these great joining instructions, all this other stuff, which I have no interest in. That's not my place of passion, but he was brilliant. And I said, cool, so let's just roll with this thing, and this is how we feel. And then as we went through it, the process, there was little parts of it that I said, hey, mate, you know what we should do next is this thing. And he was like, oh, absolutely. But it was all intuitive. It was all that emotional connection, because you could feel what the group needed, because we're all energetically connected.
Yeah.
And it's a simple concept most people don't get, but it's that feeling of, oh man, I should ring Jess. I haven't spoken to her for ages. And you text or call and you're like, oh my God, it's the weirdest thing. It's what being human is. We're just connected.
That's it. Like when you say from the heart, because that's advice that, like we've been given for generations and in movies and everything, is like, just speak from the heart, but like there's no real tangible, like, what does that even mean? What's the process? And I think it can bring up fear because of the perception that people see it as, which is, oh, you mean expose myself completely and just, like, of course I'm terrified. When it's not quite about that.
No.
So how would you explain that to someone who just didn't understand until you explained it?
You go back a step for me and go back to what is love. And that's really what it's about. Because
what is life?
No, love. What is love?
Love. Yeah, gotcha.
Because I look and think we've got this twisted perception of what love is from movies, books, bullshit, right? What we talk about, oh, I saw her across the room and our eyes met and it was an instant attraction. We fell in love. That's a physiological lust, need to procreate, sexual attraction. It's a physical attraction. And that at the base of us as an animal, and we're animals at the end of the day, is this drive to be safe and to procreate as a species. That's probably our second or third most important thing for survival of our species. Now, we've wrapped that around this romantic Hollywood notion of love. And it's just bullshit. Because as we all know, you fall in lust with someone, and you can fall in lust 3 times a day with attractive people, but you fall in lust with someone and then 3 months later, and the example I always give is, you meet someone and fall in love, but it's lust. And you're like, oh my God, it's so cute how they click their teeth when they eat. 3 months later, you're like,
except it's not.
Fucking teeth one more time, I'm going to stab you on the throat. Like, shut your mouth. So it's that's where people get caught up in this love lust thing. Love is actually, to me, something that you work on in any relationship with partners, children, parents.
It's a verb.
Absolutely, it's a verb. Absolutely. Yeah, I've never heard it explained like that. Brilliant.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, love is a verb, straight up.
So amazing. So then when you are doing love as a verb, right? When you're living in it, then it is that instinct, that gut feel, that when you operate in a way where fear isn't driving you. So take it out of this chat into a very simple way to explain it. When I was a police officer for many years ago now, I was in the police dog squad, used to get in, take guns off people and shootings and violence. When I was in that environment in my 20s it was so fast. There was violence, danger, like, boom, boom. I didn't have time to think. Like, I literally didn't have time to think. It was all instinct. Training, instinct, back to the base level of your training. So if it was fighting, if it was whatever, I just knew what to do. I didn't think through, like most of my job was chasing really violent offenders through the bush or suburbia in 3 o'clock in the morning in the pitch black, and they're armed with a firearm, and I'm got a German Shepherd and I'm chasing them to catch it. Like it makes no logical sense. It's so dangerous. I'm literally relying on this animal to track the scent of this person with a gun to take me to that person so I can take them into custody. And the dog fucks things up.
Yeah, if you sit there and think about it, you wouldn't do it.
So if I was tracking someone and we were going slowly, that fear would kick in and you'd make mistakes. I'd go, oh no, not that way. And I'd try and think for the dog is one of the things that our trainers used to say. You used to stop thinking for the dog, just follow it. So when it was really on the go fast, no time to think, it was no time for fear, really. It was instinct. And I was brilliant.
Yeah.
And I was actually really good at that. When I had time to think, I fucked everything in my life up. Other stuff in the police, like everything, because fear was such a predominant driver in that. So in a communication sense, communication's easy when you trust your instinct. If you meet someone and you go, I'm not sure about that person, trust that. If you meet someone and go, oh, this person seems awesome, trust that. But it's a difference between, oh my God, I want this person to be awesome because I'm so lonely and I need that person. That's a connection you want from fear, not a connection from instinct.
Yeah.
And then the communication is literally, if it feels calm and peaceful and easy, you're communicating from your heart. If it feels stressful and weird, you're in your head. And very simple way that I use all the time is, that fear and stress is useless unless it is to save you from death or imminent injury.
Yeah.
That system's to keep you safe physically. It's not emotionally, it's not intellectually. So if you're stressing about what's going on in your relationship, it's like using a marshmallow to bash a nail into the wall.
Yeah.
So if I said to you, do you want a hammer or a marshmallow to hit a nail in the wall? You go, well, obviously the hammer. You're using fear and stress to try and work out how to communicate. You're using a marshmallow, just the wrong thing.
Yeah, that is.
The simplicity is you've got to keep practicing it. Most people are terrified of discomfort. They're terrified of looking stupid. They're terrified of not fitting in, which are all very base physiological tribal needs for us to fit in.
Definitely.
It's this mask. And look, it's such a simple thing as a 51-year-old Caucasian man that I'll sound like a redneck, but I go, it's that when I see young women in their 20s or 30s who are very attractive, but they've got the like fake lips and fake boobs and whatever. And I go, it's your body, do what you want. Like, I'm not judging those people, but I go, these people are like physically changing their appearance to fit an ideology of that's been set by Kardashians or whomever it is, Instagram influencers or whatever, because they think that will make them more attractive or they'll fit in better or whatever that thing is. That's the epitome of fear. Where, like, I'm 51 and and it's amazing to, when I tell you this, you won't believe it, but I've never had any work done, which you wouldn't believe that. But it's, but it's that whole thing of going Botox or whatever. Like, I go, like, I'm used to have my hair a fair bit longer until the last three weeks ago. I was like, I really want to cut my hair super short, and because it's just easier and it's just how I'm comfortable. And a couple of people said to me, "Oh, it makes you look older," and I was like, who gives a fuck? That only matters if I'm not trying to look at old.
Yeah.
Like, who cares?
It's like how we express ourselves to the world, and like especially when it comes to communication as well, is like when it's fear-led, we change what that natural expression might be. And again, we can still choose and we can still have that agency over choice. And if that is your expression, perfect. But when it comes to communication of any kind, right? Like, it could be in intimate relationships, it could be in familial situations, it could be in the workplace, particularly with leadership in that way. There's so much, actually, especially in that way, there's so much around it that we have been told, present a certain kind of yourself.
Yeah.
present, like keep certain parts of yourself away, especially in the workplace, like especially as leaders. They're like, well, you can't have that human experience publicly because that won't, whatever the reason was or is. I don't really get it, because it's a holding back, and that's not what relates to people, especially as leaders, right?
Well, absolutely, because I do a lot, obviously, around leadership, and my big thing, whether it's military, police leadership, if it's corporate leaders, whomever, if people don't know you give a shit, then you're not leading, you're a boss, and everyone gets that concept. Hopefully, it's pretty simple. But the very simple part of it is this: people will follow you into a burning building if they know you care. Even if you, from a skill-based level of knowledge and different things, aren't the best practitioner in a particular field, if you are a great leader, they will follow you. And when doing that immersion retreat a couple of weeks ago, there was nobody knew each other, CEOs, business people, all high performers, a number of my clients, a number of Will's. So I was there thinking, from a practical perspective of proven leadership in their industries or whatever, they're far more skilled than I am. What I'm far more skilled at than them was the emotional vulnerability and connection. And within the first we got there for 2 hours and we did a couple of exercises, and then we were sitting around the fire at night, just like setting the tone, I guess, for the weekend. And I said, so what do you guys want to get out of this weekend? And there was a standard, oh, look, I really want to be a better leader, and all the very intellectual academic answers.
Yeah, but what does that mean? Yeah.
And I said, cool. So what's the pain behind that? So where's the insecurity? Where's your fear in that? And I would drag that out of them really lovingly, but strongly. And every one of them was in tears, because every one of them, extremely high performers, very well accomplished. Every one of them had imposter syndrome and insecurity and fear. And the beautiful thing out of that weekend was all of those people that were on it were like, holy shit, I thought I was the only person. And when we start to understand that fear of fitting in is so destructive, when you get into a corporate environment or your professional environment, it's challenging, because my belief is 90% of people aren't very happy. I think 90% of people
at work,
in general,
okay,
right?
Yep.
You go, I say there's four, I break it into 4 areas: career and money, which you could say it too, but career and money, relationships, self-worth and confidence, health and fitness. Which really basically covers your life. I'd say out of 4 areas, most people have one that's good, 2 that are okay, 1 that sucks. So few people have all 4 really humming along well. I'd suggest probably less than 10% of people have all 4 going well. So when, by virtue of statistics, 90% of people aren't living a life that they love, yet we're all trying to fit into that 90%, it just makes no sense. So I these days try to live in the 10%. I look at people who are doing really well in either one of those areas or all 4, depending, and they're more rare. And I base the old surround yourselves with the people you want to be like.
Yeah.
Show me your friends, or show your future, all of those things. Then you go, 90% of people operate from their head. They communicate out of fear. They interact out of fear. Why be like that? So the more I'm willing to be over in the, like, away from what most people do, I've got these amazing emotionally connected relationships and friendships, like our friendship. You go, where we met, had a really good,
like a little over a year ago, and
yeah. And then we're catching up for breakfast every month or 2, having these really deep conversations about your life, my life, a whole lot of things in a relationship that most people would think is really weird for a 32 for a 32-year-old young woman and a 51-year-old man. They'd go, oh, what's he trying to sleep with her? That's weird. What's in it? Oh, that's, it's creepy. And I certainly would presume that's never the energy that you've experienced from me.
Never, ever.
And we have this beautiful emotional connection that most people wouldn't have that depth of connection with their dad, daughter, whatever. And we've physically met each other 6 or 8 times.
Yeah, something like that.
But because I am and you are both willing to communicate really vulnerably and openly and emotionally. And it sounds weird. And there'll be people watching this go, what the fuck, mate?
What's he talking about?
Yeah, right?
They'd still be like, it's still weird though. But like when you put it that way, and like, because there's different ways you could view it, because we talk about work, so there's like a
Yeah,
professional element to
totally.
our friendship, right? Like,
Well, that's where it started, right?
kind of, yeah. Like it started like because I followed your work, but then we realized we both do work
Yeah.
at the same place also.
Yep.
But like there's a professional element, but there's also like a human respect thing, and I
Totally.
feel like there's this misunderstanding of what life professionally should quote unquote should be like, in the sense of, everything that we're told about, like professionally you have to separate like who you are with who you are professionally, and that makes zero freaking sense to me. Like it makes zero sense,
It's
and I don't
madness.
understand it.
Exactly. And it's madness in this sense, right? We're in an environment now with changes in the last few years, like Me Too and a whole lot of things, which are great,
Mm.
right? And I think it's brilliant. I've got two daughters who are 16 and 13. I absolutely want vile sexual predators out of professional environments.
Absolutely.
I have a putrid hatred for men who hurt women and women who hurt men, people who hurt each other. But predominantly it's men hurting women, sexually, domestic violence, whatever. A big part of that, I believe, is because men aren't given the permission, and this isn't an excuse, like that sort of behavior I just find deplorable, but men aren't encouraged or given the permission to be emotionally connected. So then they are inadequate in communication, they don't feel fulfilled, there's a domination aspect because that's what we're told men are supposed to be, like all this bullshit. And then you go into a work environment, and for me as a 51-year-old Caucasian male these days, I go, what's appropriate or not? In I met someone recently in a professional interaction who was a transgender woman who came out about 12 months ago or recently. And I was chatting to this person, and when they walked up to speak to me in the first instance, I was like, oh, g'day, mate, how are you? I said, sorry, what's your name? And they said their name as a female. I said, oh, I'm really sorry. I hope I didn't offend you. They're like, yeah, no dramas. Now, because I was like, when I saw the person, I presumed they were male. Now, should I do that? Probably not. It's a natural thing or whatever. I'm getting used to it. It's not something that I've grown up with, or so I'm willing to be vulnerable in that and go, hey, I'm really sorry. I hope I didn't offend you. Instead of going, oh, and have this fear base, which started. So the fear kicked in my mind where I was like, oh my God, fuck, what? Oh,
I fucked up, shit. Like, yeah.
What should I say? And I was like, just be connected, you moron. And I was literally like, hey, really sorry, I hope I didn't offend you. Not at all. Cool, what's happening? Had this great, beautiful conversation with this person. Because I didn't get stuck in the fear. I was like, so I made a mistake. They didn't give a shit.
And it could have gone the other way, right?
Oh.
Like you could have just kept digging that hole. Like it just
Absolutely.
And then it would have turned into an actual issue, because then it would have been disrespectful. Like the more that continued, because you weren't actually just going, oh, yep, sorry.
Yeah, and just being vulnerable to go, hey, I'm sorry. Hope I didn't offend you. They're like, no, because they didn't. When I said, hey, mate, they were obviously didn't.
Well, you say, hey, mate, to me, like, like you say it to anyone. Yeah.
So you
but
go,
it's the check-in of, and
it's
that's all we need to do. Yeah.
It was my fear in it. And then, thinking, I work with, men and women, all sorts of different people, but I interact a lot with, a number of young women who are 30. That are a couple of like daughters to me, a relationship you and I have, a couple of young women who are like in their like 15 to 12 with friends of theirs, their parents. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
But even interact with those young women and young men. I've got a young 10-year-old boy. He's coming camping with me tomorrow with a friend of mine and his son. His dad was killed in the police, and I hang out with him. His mum and I are friends, but we weren't before when I met them. But even those fears for me, like being connected to this young 10-year-old guy, beautiful young man who his mum says to me, I've had an immense impact in the last couple of years. He was going through some real struggle. His dad's not around. Never knew his dad. He died before he was born. My niece and nephew, who I'm really loving too, every time I see him, I go, I love you guys, right? They're like, yeah, we know. With him, I go, I love you, mate. You're an amazing kid. He goes, yeah, I know. These two young women that I know, because it's, I can love the barista who makes my coffee in the morning. There's varying degrees and intensities of it. And if you don't if you're not willing to understand that, and I get expressing that is different to understanding it. To express that takes an immense amount of courage. I think most people don't have, and I understand that. But you understand all the connection we have is a love. It's a friendship, professional, but it's still love. That's what human connection is.
Yeah.
When you go to the point and then in your professional life, this is something that I spend a lot of time thinking about and looking at. And I go, every job, every company, every business, every job is about achieving a thing. In policing, it's law enforcement. For accountants, it's accountancy. For plumbers, it's plumbing. But it's people who do all of those jobs. So the one commonality in every freaking job and industry and every company, business, whatever, is people. Unless you run an AI business, but still there's people who come to service the artificial intelligence and robots. So it's all people. The one skill we don't spend any fucking time teaching people is how to communicate with other people.
Well, I mean, we spend time teaching people that.
But I mean, we as a society don't.
Yeah.
Right? That's what you and I base our whole careers on.
Oh my God, yes. Yeah.
And it's simple. Because I go, in the professional sense, often where the challenge is people who are really good at a skill get promoted into a position of management, but they're good at the thing, not good at people. So often police officers that are brilliant police officers don't make the best bosses. Lawyers, not the best bosses, whatever's. So then you go to the point of we have to teach people how to be emotionally connected and loving. And that's a challenging thing because how many people do you know who go, oh yeah, my dad or, you know, mum's less so generally I'd say, but my dad only told me he loved me once in my life at this thing. You're like,
well, do you think it's because like there's a bit of a loaded question here, like it's a couple of questions, but like initially, do you think it's because we're like people are and this is very generalized, right? But like people, generally speaking, the ones that we're talking about, do you think that there is a fear of the word love because of like, oh, they're gonna like, especially in a professional setting, they're going to take it the wrong way, or it's going to be
absolutely
like, oh, love, what? Like, that's all like mushy bullshit, but it's like,
or it's inappropriate,
or it's inappropriate, or it's.
So you go,
like,
even when I said to you, we have a love, my fear brain's like, don't say that, you idiot. That sounds fucking weird. You know, like, so I do this shit, but it still feels weird because of fear. So, and that's when you go, just be loving. People freak out. But that's why I go, be connected. Is just a much better word.
Yes. And there's a follow-on question from that, because it's a word that you mentioned in the first episode that you were on, and it resonated, and I re-listened to it recently and it resonated again, is like in leadership or in general is like the idea of the alpha.
Yeah.
And you specified what that really means versus like society's general idea of what the alpha means. And I think being loving and being connected shows like it goes straight into the heart of what that is.
Yeah, sure.
Especially in leadership or in any instance, but and in leadership, right? Like it's
simple, right? So it's something I talk to, I'd say, all of my executive coaching clients with about being alpha personality. So alpha males we've all heard of and understand the term. I think we totally misunderstand what it is, and I'll come back to that.
I was going to say,
Totally misinterpret what it is. Most people think an alpha male is a tough guy with no emotion who's just an asshole. It's totally not what it is. And alpha female, similar. You are an alpha personality. You're an alpha female, absolutely, because you are driven to leadership, to have a difference, make a difference, have an impact, for sure. No one would describe you as an alpha personality in the sense of the traditional alpha male who is arrogant, destructive, whatever.
Yeah.
A true alpha personality to me, and when I talk about men and women, I have a slightly different take on that I'll explain.
Yeah.
Because we are physiologically different animals. My job as a man is protection. Your job as a woman is nurturing. In the very essence of us as animals, right? Now, people lose their fucking minds and go, oh, but it's about equality. And I go, yeah, of course it is. But sorry, you go.
Well, yeah, it's like both roles are just as important, but it's it's the whole other conversation. Keep
And
going. Sorry.
yeah, totally. And it's a thing that I was talking to someone recently, who's a person about my age, a guy, very left-leaning in their political views. And I'm very centralist these days in my political views. And we were talking about a guy called Dr. Jordan Peterson, who's a professor of psychology, brilliant, absolutely amazing. There was some very extreme left-wing commentators who labelled him a Nazi and a far right-wing extremist because young men were following him. There's a whole lot. His stuff was on YouTube. 80% of people on YouTube were young men. It was just anomaly. I was talking to this guy and he goes, I said, have you ever heard of Jordan Peterson? He goes, oh, he's just a right-wing extremist and blah, 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 blah. I was like, mate, you missed the whole message. And this guy pertains to be this very loving, caring person about equality and different things. And I'm like, you are just really driven by your fear on that end of political views, the same as people on that end is driven by fear of what they're doing. What it came back to, the alpha male thing for me is being a loving, connected person as a man 95% of the time. So I call it the 95-5 rule for alpha male.
Yes. Yeah.
I would absolutely consider myself an alpha male in that sense, where I'm really loving. I've got a 3.5-year-old goddaughter. Those women who are like daughters to me, our friendship. Like I've got a lot of people in my life where I'm really emotionally connected and loving. My a great mate of mine who's a special weapons, a police tactical operator. Whenever him and I leave each other, we're like, love you, mate, love you too. Like it's this, and he's one of the hardest men I've ever met. Great guy.
And there's still love there. It doesn't take away from the
masculinity and the tough, like the toughness, right? Because if you're a special weapons soldier or a police tactical operator where you are at the very cutting edge of violence, you better love the guys that are around you like they and know they've got your back, and you literally need to be willing to sacrifice your life for that human being. If you don't have a love for them, then what are you doing? Like you're ineffective, right? And then, so I go 95% of the time you're loving, connected, caring, nurturing, gentle. 5% of the time, slit someone's throat, just not get blood on your shoes if you have to. Now, I use that deliberately. It's just so graphic.
Yeah, and it's very like makes an impact.
And it's probably 99.9% to 0.1%, but that's a shit rule. If you want to explain it, it takes too long. 95.5 flows better. Because
sounds better.
In the last 15 years, I have not been in a physical altercation. There's been no violence. Where in the police, it was 4 or 5 times a week because of the virtue of what I did. But it's that loving side of an alpha male that is the most important, and it's the predominant and it's the dominant. But that loving doesn't mean giving up the willingness to do whatever's necessary to protect people who you care about and people in general. Because if you and I are walking down the street and I don't know you, and somebody attacks you or hurts you, then my job as a man is to step in and stop that. That's essentially what every man should do. But then we get into this thing where we're terrified of violence, which isn't violence, it's defense. But we're terrified of that because it's not seen as loving.
Yeah.
Now, I would say there's nothing more loving. I'm walking down the street and somebody's assaulting you. There's nothing more loving than me putting myself at risk to step in and help you. But we knock that down and then put it into a leadership role. You can love somebody out of your business, as in go, this person has got to go because they're no good for our business. It's no good for them. They don't fit. So if they're no good for your business, the business is no good for you. If they're a staff member, so you love them out the door through performance management.
It's almost like I say boundaries are loving.
Absolutely.
So it's almost the same, because like it's not even about pushing people away necessarily, right? Like most of boundaries aren't about that. They're about having a more successful relationship between you.
Absolutely.
But they are loving because of that, because it communicates, dare I say the word.
Yeah.
It communicates. So it's
and I love your stuff when you talk about boundaries, Jess, because it's so important and it's seen as a negative. Like I'm so strong on my boundaries with people in my life. But very lovingly. I don't have any anger, and you know this story, and I would have touched on it in our last interview, I'm sure, about my daughters and parental alienation and family court. And then Mum and I have a very, very challenging relationship, have done for the entirety of the time we were together and 8 years post our separation. I've seen my daughters for 6 hours in 9 months. Breaks my heart. 8 months, whatever. But I've actually learned my boundaries around the way I communicate with their mum and different things without going into details for their privacy and their mum's privacy, that I just don't engage in a way now that causes conflict.
Yeah.
I engage in a way that is respectful of boundaries, but still I get my point across, and I still fulfill every role I can as their dad within the bounds of what's possible without heaps of conflict, which is no good for the girls, their mum, nor me. I've been really strong. Other people close to me, I'm very, very strong with in those things, where I just don't. There's people who I just don't interact with, or I interact with sparingly because of the impact of that interaction with me. And understanding, and for me, understanding more and more as time goes on, I'm a late learner, I'm a slow learner, is that I've got a pretty full-on powerful.
But you're learning.
And I am learning.
Yeah.
Slowly, quite learning. And I get on pretty powerful and can be quite dominant. People could perceive me as dominant and strong. And so if I'm in an environment or a relationship with somebody that isn't good for me, they're going to pick that up. It's not going to be enjoyable for them either. They may just not have the courage to go, hey, this is no good for me.
Yeah.
So the boundaries are really important. Then you come all the way back to the alpha female part, which I really want to get to, is so important. It's very rarely spoken about, never I see. That loving, caring, connecting part for women is perceived more natural. I'm not sure it is, but it's certainly perceived as more natural. And then that strength part, that slit your throat and not get blood in your shoes, is perceived as far more difficult. But I would suggest, if you've seen a woman with a child and their child's in danger,
Mama bear or Mama wolf, 100%. And it's like just takes no fucking prisoners.
And women absolutely have that capacity, but it's been watered down and dumbed down in women for decades, if not centuries. And I say to my daughters when they were younger, talking about bullying at school, they were a lot younger. They said, the rule is, what do you do? Tell them, stop it, I don't like it. And I said, cool, what happens if they do it twice? Same thing. Third time, same thing. I was like, yeah, our rule's different. I said, our rule is stop, I don't like it once. Second time you say stop, I don't like it. If the person keeps doing it, if they're physically hurting you, punch them in the face. Oh, sorry, second time say stop or I'll punch in the face. Third time, punch them in the face. No, they never did that. But I said to them, my older daughter, they were about 8 and 5 at the time. My older daughter goes, oh, Dad, I can't. I'd get sent to the principal's office. I go, that's okay, Dad, because I'll ring me and I'll come and tell them it's what I've told you to do. Because never at any point in your life, honey, should you have to put up with physical violence or somebody hurting you and you just keep copping it. You need to be able to stand up for yourself, and that's okay. If you say stop it once and they do it, you say stop it twice, or there's going to be a repercussion, I'm going to punch you, and they do it again, punch them. Because we tell women to be meek and mild. We tell women, the whole...
Society has told women a lot.
But it's and men, and this is what I find really interesting.
And men also, yeah.
Yeah, and I know you're not doing this, but I go, we have all this conversation around women have been downtrodden and told not to be a certain way. And I go, absolutely. You can't deny that. And men have not been discriminated against anywhere near like women are. Anybody who says that's a moron. But men have been equally told, don't be soft, don't be loving, boys don't cry. Equally as destructive.
And it's so damaging. It's so damaging. What I'm hearing though is like regardless of violence or not or whatever, right? There's two sides that are needing to be expressed here. It's to be loving is not to lose strength.
Totally.
And to be strong does not mean that you are hard or violent even, right? Like, to be strong doesn't mean that you are aggressive or that you are unreasonable and hard-hearted, right? Like it's the both end. It's the loving and strength are very hand in hand.
It has to be.
Yeah.
I was at the 10-year-old boy whose dad died in the police, who I hang out with a fair bit. I was at his soccer game recently, and long story short, he accidentally was going for the ball and kicked another boy in the face. And the boy didn't get badly injured or whatever. He sort of went down, had a few tears. There was all sorts. There was no drama. So the kid was trying to head the ball. He was trying to kick it. It was just...
Yeah, it just happens in sports.
And he's just he's not a violent kid. He's a beautiful kid. And his mum and I were standing there watching the game, and then all of a sudden this guy came over and was really aggressive. And probably a guy my age and very judgmental. I looked at him in the environment. I won't say what it was, but in the environment I was in, the way he was dressed, I was like, yep, you think you're pretty cool. You think you're running the show. So he sort of got a bit aggressive, and the kid's mum is an ex-police officer. She's very capable in her own right. And she goes, oh, okay, no dramas. Let's go and sort this out. He came over, you so-and-so's parents. Blah. She goes, yeah, I'm his mum. What happened? He hurt this kid, blah, blah. And it wasn't that incident he was talking about. It was something else. So she starts walking off across the field with this guy to go and see the kids and the coach. Unbeknownst to her and I, this guy had already had a really aggressive chop at the then 9-year-old boy, her son. And if I knew that, I would have had a very different reaction to this guy. And she looked at me, and I sort of looked at her like, do you want me to come with you? And she was like, no, like, I'll handle it. I was like, cool. So respect for her. I'm like, I'm not his dad.
She's capable. Like she's got it. Yeah.
So I just watched as they're walking across the field. This guy's really aggressive. Like getting really aggressive with her. And she just didn't take a backward step, which is amazing. They go. He walks back across the field on an angle towards me, and I had baseball caps and sunnies on, had my arms folded. By this stage, I'm like, you are a putrid human being. Whether that's accurate or not, that was my assessment. Because I go, any guy who will abuse a woman he doesn't know in public, I wonder what your behaviour is like behind closed doors. He walks back and he's looking at me, and you can see he wants to come and have a chop at me, but he's obviously going, oh, I don't know how well that'll go for me. So he walks off. Then she comes back. There was another mum. The three of us are standing there talking. Old mate comes back a second time of it pretty storming over. And I said, hey, old mate's coming back. I'll handle it. Yeah, no drama. So I turned around, and he was a distance of probably 10 metres away or something, 15 metres away. And he starts, bye. I go, hey, mate, you're done. Walk away. And he goes, you can't tell me, fuck. I said, you're fucking done. Walk away. And he goes, oh, turns and walks. Now I go, I was extremely loving to that guy when I went, you're fucking done. Because my warning to him very caringly is, keep pushing the limit. There's going to be a line in the sand. Because if you think you're coming back here to abuse her when I'm standing here, that's not going to happen. Now, I didn't. The old me, when I was in my 20s, what I thought enough, I would have been like abusive. Yeah. But I wasn't aggressive. I wasn't abusive. I wasn't violent. I'm like, if it gets to that, no problems. But that's loving.
Yeah. How do people delineate the difference though? Because I feel like that could be used as an excuse a lot.
Really easy. Because it was driven from me trying to have an impact, not fear.
Thank you. Yeah. That's simple. It.
So I was literally going, how do I curb his behaviour for his benefit? Yeah. Because he was making a fool of himself in front of probably 30 parents. His son goes to the same school. Like there was a whole lot of...
Well, for everyone's benefit, for his kids' benefit, like it's not even a benefit about coming down to violence even. It's like, what's the benefit here that gives everyone the best possible outcome? Yeah.
And when I found out a little bit more about the guy later, which I won't say, there was... I can see why he has a complex that he does whatever he wants, right?
Yeah.
His profession, different things. Now I'm like, wow, it's actually really sad to me that he would be my age, would be my guess, that nobody's ever had a conversation with him in a way that's powerful enough from a place of love and connection to go, hey, buddy, that's actually not okay. And we're getting into this dangerous part, I think, societally at the moment, where people who are violent and aggressive are going unchecked, male and female, because we've become so scared of powerful people. So an example is, a couple of days ago, a police officer run down and killed by a stolen vehicle in Brisbane. I've got a little bit of background knowledge in that there was actually, looks like there was 2 females in the vehicle, no, not a male driver. I automatically presumed it would be a male driver, right? It wasn't. It was 2 women. And it was extremely violent the way that this police officer, it wasn't an accident. So I'm like, wow, when you can get a woman whose violence isn't most women's natural tendency, that's physiologically not the natural tendency. Now, there's probably drugs and all sorts of things involved. But I go, whether it's this increase in domestic violence that we have now, statistically, all of this other increase in violence when we are supposed to be developing as a society, I think comes back to a very basic thing. We have demonized strength as violence.
Yeah, we've misappropriated strength as violence.
So we tell people don't be violent. But what we're saying is don't be strong. And then what happens is the very small percentage of people who are, whatever has occurred in their life that makes them want to be violent, or they probably don't want to be, has them react violently. I've done a fair bit of work in prisons with prison officers and different things. I used to have an opinion to go, let's lock up all the criminals because they're bad people. Now I'm like, holy shit, 99% of them people who just made bad choices and had a bad start. There was a whole lot of things. Now, there's probably 0.0 something of a percent of people that are psychopaths or sociopaths, sure.
Yeah.
Most people are just really hurting.
Yeah.
So, but we have these people, there's no balance anymore of going, well, no balance, I'm getting very black and white, but there's less going, it's okay to stand up very strong, lovingly. And
yes.
this sounds so ridiculous, but I believe this wholeheartedly. Most people would go, mate, you've lost your mind. If I'm in my house and somebody breaks in here and tries to hurt my partner, and Rachel's very capable in her own right, I wouldn't even have to defend her. But if I had to, if I'm going at that lovingly, as weird as that sounds, that could be violence. It could be a physical altercation that I'm using now to stop that person. Now, it could be fear, could be whatever. That interaction with that guy, and that was only a couple of months ago, really hit home to me to go, holy shit, I am so different. Because 10 years ago even, I would have been, because I had a real fear response, the adrenal response. I was like, oh, I wasn't super, like as calm as I tell that story, I still had that natural fear response.
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
physiological. That's...
Because you have time to think about it. Going back to, like you were saying, you're like, what's going to happen? You were analysing all the different possibilities of how it would go. And
yeah. But what happened was, because I was calm and connected to him, I wasn't like, listen here, give him a big, I was just like, you're done, mate. You're fucking done. That one extra word and the way that I enunciated that, he was like, oh, and walked away. And I go, great result. That's the part of communication, leadership, all those things that we need to start empowering people to have again. Is for 1% of the time, you might have to have a really forthright, difficult discussion with someone about the boundaries. It doesn't mean it's angry. You don't raise your voice. It's not violent. It's just strong.
It's saying, hey, this is not okay. And if this continues, like with boundaries, if this continues, this is the consequence. The consequence is not a punishment. It is just a consequence. It is just a reaction, a result of this continued behavior.
Absolutely. And that there's nothing could be more loving than that, in the sense of, so let's say, it's really weird, I'll put myself as a bad guy. If it was our friendship and we're catching up for coffee or brekkie like we did a couple of weeks ago, and I'm like, hey, you're really attractive, Jess, and you and I should go out romantically or whatever. And you're like, oh, wow, yeah, this is a bit awkward, Shaun, because that's not how I see you and blah, blah, blah. Then I go, oh, wow, sorry, I misinterpreted that, no problems.
Yeah.
That would be you being really strong. The difference in our age, gender, all sorts of things, that would be quite a difficult conversation for most young women to have with an older male, I would suggest.
It would be uncomfortable.
Yeah, totally.
Because I'd be like, oh, that's disappointing. That I'm having to have this conversation. Fuck, all right. God damn it, here we are.
Clarify that. It's not disappointing that I've said it. It's disappointing for you that I've misinterpreted it.
Yeah.
Right. So,
and now it impacts our friendship, and
or not, because it doesn't have to, right?
No, exactly.
So, but it normally would, absolutely. But I go, so that strength to go, oh, Shaun, I actually don't see you like that. I'm sorry if I've given you the wrong energy. I go, oh, if it was our interaction, I'll be like, oh, no drama.
Yeah.
Like one of the young women who's like a daughter to me is 31. We've been really close for about 7 or 8 years. So she was 23 or 24 when I first met her. She's a very attractive young woman. I met her through training. She's very open about been through a lot of domestic violence. Child, a whole lot of change. Didn't have a father figure in her life. Was up here in Brisbane on her own. We sat down and we met through training, hit it off. Really great young woman. I've ended up, Rach and I were in her bridal party. We're godparents to her daughter. She's like my daughter. I spoke to her this morning. It's like I'm talking to my daughter. It's beautiful. when we sat down to have a coffee, I said we sort of got to know her about some stuff after some questions around training or whatever. I said, hey, who do you have in your life that like you can go to for advice? And she goes, oh, no one really. I'm my own sort of person. I'm like, look, I'm old enough to be your dad. I said, I get this is probably weird. I said, this isn't some weird sexual thing. I'm not trying to sleep with you, but I'm old enough to be your dad. I'd love us to have that friendship if you'd like that. She goes, I'd love that. Simple. Now that was really loving, powerful, strong. Instead of me going
and vulnerable.
Instead of me going, oh, we should hang out and have a coffee and do stuff. And she's like, is he hitting on me or not?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I think like that vulnerability is strength also, and loving, because like to let someone know, hey, like I'm happy to kind of like more or less like, be that father figure, or in other relationships, like, hey, I don't feel the same way, or this or that, like to actually give voice to that
absolutely
can activate a fear response, because you're like, what's going to happen? How are they going to take it? And like likewise of saying, hey, this is how I feel. That's the fear, like that. It's the same two sides of the same coin, but it's what is loving and strong is being in that vulnerability and still expressing
and
something.
totally. And then the honesty when it comes to vulnerability isn't harsh. So, and that's where people's fear of communication. The young guy, his mum, the 10-year-old boy who I hang out with, his mum, we knew of each other in the police but never met each other. So when I first met her 2 or 3 years ago, her son was going through some pretty significant challenge with some stuff because of his dad's death and whatever. He was only 7, and I said, hey, I met her at this thing. I said, hey, who do you have around supporting you with him? Like, and she goes, oh, look, no one really. And I said, I get, this is going to sound really weird. I said, you don't really know me, but I'm so happy to hang out with him, spend time with him, do what I can to help him. I go, that connection as a police officer, but also just as a young man. My dad I loved to death, but we're never close when I was young. Dad wasn't around much. So I go, I get that impact. So if I can help him, I'd love to do that. And she was like, oh, yeah, okay. And I said, in the first chat, because we had mutual friends, she sort of knew my personality. I said, I get this sounds weird, like I'm a pedophile trying to groom you to hang out with your child, right? And she laughed and goes, yeah, a bit. I said, yeah, I get that. So I'm happy to hang out with you. Let's chat, like balls in your court. 12 months, nothing. I went out. I went and hung out with him and her once with my daughters at a mutual friend's place, teaching him to ride a motorbike, did whatever. We didn't have a lot of interaction. And I saw her again at another thing, a police thing, and I said, he was there. I said, how's he going? Oh, he's having some chat. I said, listen, let's catch up and have a coffee. Just you and me. So we caught up, had a chat for a couple of hours. I said, listen, this is why I want to help him. This is what, because she's like, but how could I expect you to do that? She said to me, she said, well, let me pay you. I said, no way in the world.
Yeah, it's like, what do you want from this? Like, yeah.
Of course, right? Yeah. And I said, listen, my drive is, if I can help him, I said, I'm not going to hang out with him every day, right? So, but if I can spend a few hours with him a month or something like that, if he just knows I'm here, then that may well save him and you having to do a whole lot of work to undo this impact in 20 years' time. And my drive is to try and have impact and help people, especially make men more loving. If I can help him do that on the way through instead of having to undo it, that just makes sense to me. And she goes, wow, well, let me pay you for it. I was like, no way. I said, so in 10 years' time, he finds out you've been paying me, then he's like, this whole relationship's based on money.
Yeah.
She goes, oh, good point. So they're coming to have dinner with Rachel and I tonight before we go away when I go camping tomorrow. Now, it's still weird in the sense of, I don't know anyone else who does that. But Rachel's like that. I'm like that. I know you're like that. But I go, I have all these relationships with people, professionally, personally, that are so unusual because I just want to be emotionally connected to people.
Because they're not afraid of depth.
Exactly. And I need them.
Yeah. Yeah. You need that to feel, you feel more fulfilled from that. Yeah.
And I don't wait. And this is the whole communication, leadership, all the stuff we're talking about. I don't go second. I have the conversations first. And as in, if there's something I think's a bit weird, I go, hey, I hope you don't think this, because that's not the case. Or
Or you call it out if, like, you know,
yeah,
if you ask a question, if it feels like it's coming from the other person, like, hey, what's going on here, and give them an opportunity to express it too, because it goes both ways.
absolutely.
Okay, last, if you could summarize as we wrap up, if you could summarize, what would loving, strong, vulnerable leadership look like in the world?
Yeah, perfect. Very simply, if we had leaders in our society, politically, economically, corporately, who genuinely cared about other people first, that's what loving, connected leadership looks like. So
Well, that feels like easy. It should be easy.
exactly, but it's not, because
No.
then we have insecurities, doubts, fracture, selfishness,
Power.
money, power, blah, blah, blah. So the thing that I find, it's why I have these amazing connections in my life, because it's so fucking easy, because I just care. When I'm coming to talk to you on this podcast, I'm like, I really want to give the best I can for your audience and have an impact, so they walk away and go, wow, I really took something.
Yeah.
I'm not here going, hey, I'll do this interview with Jess because then I can sell more fucking books or some shit. Like,
Yeah.
because the success that comes in my business, that is ever increasing these days, comes because I genuinely care. Whatever any of my clients or people I work with, when I talk about money with them, I get uncomfortable talking about money, because it's really difficult when this is about impact to talk about money. And they go, what, are you crazy? I want you to work with me, or you've made a massive impact on me. I've got a guy I'm working with who's in his 60s, extremely successful businessman, like very most successful person I've probably met, very wealthy. And we finished a program I do, and I said, so that's finished. If he goes, oh, I don't want to finish it. That's the best thing I've ever done in my life. Blah blah. I said, cool. That means it will cost this to keep going. He goes, I don't care. I'll pay 10 times that. Like, this is the best thing ever. I said, yeah, but I feel really uncomfortable, because I don't want you to think this is all about money, but it's just an exchange. This allows the time for me. And he goes, stop talking. I'll just
do it. Yeah.
So it's
that's a lesson for you in there too. Yeah.
So what it is then, Jess, is a simple thing. I just love and care about people. I love and care about them enough to never talk to them if they're not my people and I find them challenging. Or I love and care about them enough to do whatever I can to help them, and everything in between.
Yeah.
So leadership in the world, leadership anything, give a shit about your people. I have a slide that I use in particular leadership presentations. I go, what's leadership? And then people go, it's this, it's that. It's all the textbook definitions. Then in capital letters, I just have, give a shit about your people. That's all leadership.
Perfect.
It's all communication is.
Thank you so much for coming on for another go round. If you want to follow Shaun's work, he has a podcast, the Strong Life Project podcast, and can be found on Instagram at the Strong Life Project.
Correct.
Anywhere else I caught all of that?
You're
perfect.
Good. Facebook, Strong Life Project. Instagram, the Strong Life Project. LinkedIn, Shaun O'Gorman, the Strong Life Project. So if you Google that Strong Life Project, you'll find me. I've got a book, 19 podcast, whatever. If people want to find me, they'll find me.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jess. Love it.